Some of these laws I wish God would explain a little bit more. Some of them I don't totally understand, but one of the things that I have found helpful is when I've compared Israel's laws to the laws of the peoples around Israel and others who lived at that time in the ancient Near East. And when we do that, we begin to see that there are things that make Israel's law unique. And actually, one of those things is that God sometimes does explain himself. There are different types of laws, and some of the laws are where God just says, if you do this, then this will happen. But then there is another type of law that says, do it like this for this reason. This is why. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is in verse 14. It says, don't take advantage of a hired worker, pay them their wages before sunset. And the reason for that is because they are poor and they're counting on it. Otherwise, they may cry to the Lord against you and you will be guilty of sin. And then a little later on, it goes on and it talks about when you're kind of gathering up your crop and your things like that. It says, leave the remains for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. And the reason for that in verse 22 is remember that you were slaves in Egypt. This is why I command you to do it. And so actually, more often than not, when Israel are given a reason, it's because God cares for the poor. And this is a theme that we're having over these couple of days, isn't it? God really, really cares about those who are fatherless, those who are foreigners in that culture. That meant they were treated as second-class citizens, sometimes like it can do in our culture, even though that's wrong. And he cares for those who have nothing. And one of the things that encourages me when I read the laws that I don't always understand, and God doesn't always explain why, is when he does explain why and he does give his reasons, you see again his kindness and you see again his mercy and you see also his justice. And there are some things that will always be slightly grey in terms of trying to connect with them today, but the stuff that we got to cling to as we read the scripture is the main and the plain, which is the God that I worship and the God that you worship is just and kind and powerful and merciful and strong. And he was when he gave this law, and he is today when we live under the new covenant, where he came in his strength and in his power to carry out justice by dealing with sin on the cross. And through that, he poured out his mercy that we might enjoy it and that we might know it today. Some of this stuff is dry, but when you dig into it and you begin to discover a little bit of God's heart behind it, it's worth the effort and it's worth keeping going with this.